video, we will cover the development tools, and we will talk more particularly of classes and their attributes. This video follows the introductory video of Mazao, in which I review the various tabs found at the bottom of the screen. In the first video, we had considered that the products were dishes, and we created the event Dinner at Bob. I had very quickly shown a few possibilities offered by the development tools, like for example the possibility to change the name products in dishes. I will go in detail on the change of name of a class during this video, and even show how to change the icon. But I will first make a short theoretical introduction on what is a class, an instance, and a class attribute. Then I will come to practice and I will show how to add and delete classes and class attributes. The purpose of this theoretical introduction is to show how the DataLisp objects are structured. Once you understand how classes, instances, and class attributes are structured, it will be much easier to enter the development tools. The first question that may be asked is, what is an object? Of course, can be found on the internet several definitions, all as good as each other, depending on the context in which these objects are used. But here I will talk about objects of DataLisp. And to DataLisp, an object is a list of pairs, property value, that can be represented as a small table with two columns. Then suppose you want to record in DataLisp an object like that. What are the properties that we will register? What can we say to describe this object? Well, the first thing we want to say about this object is that it's a table. The first property that I write is the name of this object, a table. We can now describe this table specifically and say that it is green. And we can continue specifying its length of 1.5 meter, and we can also add its width and height. To represent an object in this way is not bad, but we quickly realize that this is not really enough. Because this object representation is what exactly? Is this set of properties representing the green table which is located in my garden? Or is it representing more generally the concept of green table? Or even is it representing the set of all the green tables that have exactly these dimensions? We feel that there is obviously a relationship between this description and the object, but we are unable to see clearly at what level is this description. In addition, the choice of properties is here completely free. In fact, this may seem to be an advantage. But if I want to list all the tables I have in my home, it would be rather useful that I describe each table using exactly the same set of properties, for example, to be able to compare them. If for some table I give precise dimensions in centimeters, but if for others I give a simple description like small coffee table, if I do this, I will very quickly get a rather chaotic set of objects. So we can implicitly feel that it should be a minimum of organization, of constraints on the properties of the table. And it is to answer these questions that we will begin to customize these objects, giving them different roles. And that is how we are going to have objects classes and objects instances. So, what's a class and what is an instance? With the example of the table, I already sketched out the dichotomy that exists between the concept of a green table and the actual green table that sits in my garden. But to clearly explain what is a class and what is an instance, I will make an analogy in the architectural world. Here is the plan of a house. Everyone knows what is a plan and what is a house. These are two very different things. This is not the plan of a boat or a dishwasher. It is a house plan. A house plan is therefore used to build a house. The plan defines all the characteristics of the house. And furthermore, with the same plan, nothing prevents us to build a second house, as well as a third. Well, let's say as a first approximation that the plan is the equivalent of a class. And the houses are the instances of the class. Okay, this is nice stuff, but this brings us where? Well, it has been said that a class is an object, and so like any object in DataLisp, it is represented by a list of pairs, property value. The first property of the class is going to distinguish this class from the other classes. As well as on a house plan, it is indicated that it is a plan of a house and not a dishwasher. We will have the first class property indicating that this class represents a house. This property is the class identifier. Then the class will define all the characteristics of the house. In fact, it will define the list of properties that can have a house. This means the list of properties that can have an instance. And because the instances are also objects, they are also represented by property value pairs. The first instance property of a house could be, for example, the color of the roof. This term, roof color, is a data, a value at the level of the class. But it is a property at the level of the instance. We realize now that we reach the limit with the analogy of a house plan. Indeed, a class is much more powerful than a plan. While a house plan describes a particular type of house, the class house describes several types of houses. It represents the concept of house even better than the house plan. For example, you can add the property number of rooms, and different instances can have different values. And we can continue like this and add if the house has a fireplace, and even we can write who is the owner. Well, now it's time to analyze more in detail what we just did with a class and an instance. First, a class has a set of predefined and fixed properties, as here the ID and list of instance properties. This list is not editable because it is DataLisp which sets the list of properties of the classes. However, an instance owns all the properties set by its class. And here this list is editable because it is set by the person who built the class. An instance cannot have other properties than the one defined in its class. Second, in what has been described so far, the values of the instance can be anything. We record that the color of the roof is blue, but we could very well write 145 or Saturn. Again, we realize that we should organize this. We should be able to indicate that the color of the roof must be a color, that the number of rooms must be a number, that the fireplace property value must be a boolean, that is a yes or no value, and that the owner must be a link to another object. And it is to be able to indicate this type of information in the database that I will now introduce a third kind of object found in DataLisp, the class attribute. So, what is a class attribute? Well, a class attribute is an object that will bring together all the information about a property of an instance, as for example, that the roof color property must be a color. Moreover, this class attribute object is directly associated with the class. So we have that the class with the ID house has a link to an attribute object whose ID is roof color. This attribute has a property type whose value is color. In this way, this attribute represents a property that can have an instance of the class house. The advantage of the attribute object is that DataLisp will be able to add a variety of additional information concerning this property of the instance. For example, we will be able to indicate how this property will be displayed, or even indicate whether the value of this property is confidential. I talked about the private properties in the first video on Mazao. So we have an attribute for the color of the roof. We will therefore continue and create in the same way an attribute for the number of rooms, for the fireplace, and for the owner. And finally, we get a structure like this. We have a class that has a list of attributes, and each attribute defines a property that can have an instance of the class. And so, it is with this structure in mind that we can go into the details of the Mazao development tools. At the end of Dinner at Bob, we watched the movie Superman, and I would like to be able to record this information in my event Dinner at Bob. So I should add in the class event a new attribute called Watched Movies, and the instance Dinner at Bob would therefore have a property Watch Movies for which I will be able to write Superman. But I wish that the movie is not only a simple text that gives the title of the movie. I wish that each movie is an object, in which I can register its title, its year, add some pictures, and so I can link this object to other objects. To do this, I have to create a new class movie, and the instance DinnerAtBob will have a link to Superman, an instance of the class movie. To create a class, I need the development tools. To gain access to the development tools, I must first make them visible. To do this, I go to the Settings tab. If not yet done, I need to unlock this feature in the store. I also make sure that the Development Tools switch is open. This switch allows to show or hide the Tools tabs in the tab bar. Those Tools tabs are characterized by their brown color. As we want to create a class, let's click on the Class tab. On the left, we have the list of classes. We will talk about the right side of the screen later. This list is actually a tree view of the classes existing in Mazao. At the top, we have the superclass, which is called Object. All other classes are subclasses of the class Object. We recognize the 4 classes of Mazao: Product, Contact, Task, and Event, that correspond to the first 4 tabs found in the bottom of the screen. For the moment, in this version 1.04 of Mazao, only the Object class can have subclasses. So, we currently have a tree of classes that accepts only a single level of depth. Thus, for the moment, the Product class, which is a subclass of Object, cannot have itself subclasses. On the other hand, I can add in Object as many subclasses that I want. Well, now let's see how to create our first new class movie. To add a class in the class list, we click on the Add button, which is located in the title bar. This shows a set of new buttons in front of each class. Each green button allows to make addition in the corresponding class. Only the class Object can have subclasses, so to create a new class, my only choice is to add a subclass to class Object. So I press the plus sign in front of the class Object, and I get a menu which proposes to add a subclass in the class Object. But I'm curious, what happens if I click on the other green buttons? Okay, let's cancel this operation and let's see what happens if I click on the button in front of the Product class. That's interesting. I get a menu which proposes to add an attribute in the class Product. So we see that we can add a subclass only in the Object class, while we can add an attribute only in the other classes. Okay, let's create our first class. I confirm add a subclass. Now Mazao asks me the ID of the new class. An ID is a unique name that identifies the class. There cannot be 2 classes with the same identifier. An ID must be a string that only contains alphanumeric characters and hyphens. Thus, an ID cannot contain spaces. Note that the identifier of a class is not the same as the name of the class. The name of the class is what is displayed to the screen, what is displayed to the user. However, the ID is like a key for internal access, hidden to the user and used by the Lisp language. The name of the class can be multilingual, but the identifier remains unchanged, regardless of the language. I will come back to the name of the class just after. As ID for my class movie, I will choose the lowercase word movie. This will allow me to see the difference between the ID and the name of the class. By convention, the identifier is usually entirely in lowercase. You can use capital letters, but you have to be careful because an ID is case sensitive. So I will input movie and click OK. And I have my new class movie. All properties of the class are displayed in the right part of the screen. This is important. What we have here on the right side are the properties of the class. They are not the attributes that represent the properties of the instances. We will talk about the attributes later. And so, as the first property, I see here the class ID with the value movie. And just below, we have the property class name that currently has no value. Note that as long as a class has no name, Mazao will display its ID instead of name, as here in the list of classes, or here in the title bar, we can see movie in lowercase. Let's add a name to the class. and I will write movie with a capital M. We notice that when the class has a name, it is the name of the class that is used to represent this class, and no more its identifier. The name of a class is therefore simply a cosmetic information. Change the name of the class does not change anything regarding the behavior of the application. On the other hand, the ID is essential, and if you change it, you should well know what you are doing. We also notice that in the list of the class, the name of my new class, movie, is written in black, while other classes are in brown. In fact, brown classes are predefined by Mazao. Those classes are protected. That is to say that it is not possible to delete them and the value of some properties cannot be changed. But let's go back to the class properties. The following property is a switch shown in the tab bar. If I activate this switch, the class name is displayed in the tab bar. We now see here my new class, movie, between the class event and the calendar. In fact, to place the tabs, Mazao simply follows the order of the classes as they appear in the list here. To move the movie tab, we simply need to move the movie class in the tree. For example, I will place my class movie between product and contacts. And now the movie tab is the second tab between the products and the contacts. So we created our new movie class and I can now click Done in my list of classes to exit the addition mode. The properties of a class are divided into three sections. First, we have the properties that directly relate to the class itself, as its ID and its name. And these properties are grouped in the section Description of the class. Then we have the properties that relate to each instance of the class. This section is called Description of an instance. But attention again, it is still not the attributes or properties of the instances. We have here the class properties that define characteristics of the instances. So, for example, the first property in this section is instance title. The value of this property is a Lisp expression that allows to combine properties of the instance to obtain the title of the object. For example, for a product. The title of the product is either its designation or its location. For a task, its title is simply the value of the property description. This second section, therefore, includes the properties involved in the description of an instance. And the third section, Description of the list of all instances, groups the properties of the class concerning the list of the instances of this class. To better explain to you what it is, I click on the tab Movie. The left side of the screen displays the list of all instances movie. For the moment, we have no instance and this list is empty. Well, the third section of the class properties concerns this part of the screen. That is to say, the organization and the visualization of this list of instances. Similarly, certain properties of the second part here of the class affect the right side of the screen. But let's go back to the first section of our class movie. We have already spoken of the class ID, and we have called our class movie. The name of a class can be used in different contexts, as here the name is included in the list of classes. Similarly, if we choose to show the class in the tab bar, its name is also found in the tab. But if you pay attention to the other tabs, the class name is in the plural. And it makes sense because the Products tab shows the list of all the products that we have in our database. But for the tab Movie, the name of the class is in the singular. It is like that we would have only one movie in the database. We therefore need to be able to indicate the plural form of the word movie, and Mazao will use this plural form everywhere it is necessary, and particularly in the tab. Then, instead of adding a new property that would be class name in the plural, Mazao allows to include the plural information in the property class name. For this, behind the word movie in the singular, I will add a separator pipe plus colon, followed by the word movies in the plural. In having done this, we notice now that movies in the tab is in plural, while the name of the class in the title bar is still movie in the singular. So the name of a class consists of several parts separated by a vertical bar. The first part is the default name. The other parts, called variations, are prefixed with an indicator. Here the plus sign is the indicator of the plural form. As in general an indicator can have any number of characters, we place a colon to separate the indicator from the text itself, here movies in the plural. This convention of variations allows to add any kind of meta information about the name. For example, in certain languages like French, Spanish or Portuguese, we will add a variation that tells the gender of the word, so Mazao can adjust its messages accordingly. I will describe the convention of variations in the video concerning the glossaries and the terms. But for now in English, we just need to be able to write the class name in the singular and in the plural. Now that we understand how the class name property works, we can change the name of the class product in Dish, as we had quickly shown in the first video. So let's go in the class product, we enter in edit mode, and now we can change the name in the singular and in the plural in dishes. And now, everywhere the name product has been replaced by the word dish. On the tab, in the list of classes, and even in the event dinner at Bob. We have the section dishes. Of course, the identifier of the class dish is always product. Product is the internal name of the class. If we want to perform an operation on this using the Lisp language, we will use the class ID, and therefore product. So, thanks to the switch shown in the tab bar, we have added a tab movie. And if I can add tabs, I can also remove tabs. For example, if in my database I don't use the task object, I can very well remove the tab tasks. To do this, we just need to go in the class task, go in edition mode, and close the switch which shows this class in the tab bar. And now the tab bar no longer have the task icon. For the moment, the Movies tab shows the standard class icon. To change this, we have the property class icon. The value of this property is an image that will be used as the icon for this class. To add an icon, we simply click on the button Add in the properties value, and we perform exactly the same way to add a picture in an instance, as we have seen in the video Introduction to Mazao. Knowing that this picture will be used as an icon, it is better to choose an image that lends itself to become an icon. But let's see what happens if I choose a regular picture. For example, I have here a very pretty picture of an old projector. Let's see what it gives if I choose this image. Mazao converted the photo to make it black and white. It increased the contrast and finally transformed grayscale levels of white into transparency levels. Sometimes the result may be very good, but it is rather rare. Look here, in small size. We cannot recognize anything. So it's better to choose an image that already looks like an icon. And this is much better. We have our icon in the tab and in the list. Below the class icon property, we have the property class icon code. This means that rather than choose an image, we can write Lisp code that provides an image. The simplest way to get an image of an icon in DataLisp is to use the icon function that returns an icon from the icon library of DataLisp. For example, we can write icon movie. Okay, nothing changed. This is because if at the same time we give an image and we add Lisp code, it is the image that is used. Let's temporarily remove the image. And now it's the DataLisp icon movie which is used as the icon for my class movie. I will make several videos about Lisp programming, and so I don't enter in more detail on this point here. For the moment, I will just replace the icon with the film. But now that we know how to change the icon of a class, we are going to change the icon of the class dishes. I see here that Mazao uses the icon product. As a protected class, I cannot even change this Lisp code. However, the class icon attribute is available, so I will add an image that will be the icon of the class dish. And now I have my dishes and my movies. Well, I'm going now temporarily do a pause in the description of the properties of the classes, because it is time to add a few attributes in my movie class. It's great to have a new tab, Movies, but what happens if I create an instance of my movie class? Let's see. I click on the Add button and I get a new movie instance. Perfect! Except that the right part of the screen is empty. My new movie instance has no property, and even I cannot press the button Done because it is gray. I can only cancel this operation. To be able to add properties to an instance, we should first add attributes in the class, and that is what we will do now. We can add and remove class attributes from the tree of classes. In the front of each class is a small blue triangle. This is a button that allows you to show or hide objects that belong to this class, and in particular, the class attributes object. For example, by clicking on the triangle before the class dishes, I reveal all the attributes for this class. As this view displays a tree, I still have my other classes here under. Okay, let's hide the list of attributes of the class dish. And what happens then for our class movie? If I try to display the list of attributes of a movie, I see that nothing is happening. The triangle rotates, but I have no attribute. So, I will add a first attribute by clicking on the Add button in the title bar, and then click on the plus sign before the class movie. And I confirm Add an attribute in the class movie. As for the creation of a class, Mazao asks us first and foremost to enter the identifier of the new attribute. And as for the ID of a class, the attribute ID can only contain alphanumeric characters and hyphens. While the class ID must be unique among all classes of Mazao, the attribute ID must be unique within the class. We can therefore have two classes that each have an attribute with the same ID. If we have, for example, the class Movie and Book, the two classes can have an attribute whose identifier would be title. So, our first attribute will be the title of the movie, and I write the ID title in lowercase. We now see under the class Movie our first attribute title. For each attribute, we see its icon in the shape of a small pin, the attribute ID, title, and the type of the attribute, here text. By default, the type of a new attribute is text. In reality, to be more precise, by default, the attribute type is data and the data type is text. As for a class, we have the property attribute name, and we can write movie title. And that's it for our first attribute. We have the attribute ID, the attribute name, and by default, the attribute data type is text. Now that the attribute has a name, we can see that in the title bar, we have the name of the class followed by the name of the attribute. The name of the class are between brackets simply to better visualize and distinguish the name of classes. In the list of attributes, it is always the attribute ID that is indicated. The reason is that when writing Lisp code that use the properties of instances, it means the attribute IDs, it's easy to quickly find the identifier that you search through this list. Let's now make a new attempt to create an instance of movie. Okay, this is already much better because I now have my first property movie title. So I immediately write the title of the movie that we saw at Bob's Place. This means Superman. I have introduced the title of the movie, but in the list of the movies and in the title here, I still see new movie. This is because I did not yet set in my class movie what is the title of a movie instance. I therefore return to the class movie. I enter in edition mode, and I have here the property instance title. It is here that I have to tell that the title of the instance is the value of our new title property. I have to write Lisp code here. Therefore, we have to respect the syntax of DataLisp, which I will explain in detail in other videos. But for the moment, simply remember that we need to write a dot in front of the attribute ID we want to use. I therefore write .title. Now we realize the interest of having the attribute ID displayed in the list of classes because it enables me to copy it here without making mistakes. In fact, this notation .title means that I want to use the value of the property title of the current instance as the title of the instance. This dot in front of the identifier is the equivalent of self or this in other programming languages. Okay, let's see what happens in our movie instance. And now we have here Superman in my list of movies. Let's directly add a second attribute. Our second attribute will be the year of the movie. And let's write the ID year in lowercase. And I directly add the name of the attribute, year of the movie. And as data type, I leave for the moment the default type text. I will go into the detail of the different types of data like numbers and dates in another video. For the moment, I keep the demo as simple as possible. So I quit the edition mode, and this is my second property of the class movie. Before going to see the instance, I directly add in the class that the year of the movie is the subtitle of the instance. And as for the title, I write .year. So the value of the property title will be the instance title, and the value of the property year will be the instance subtitle. Let's now return to our instance of movie, and I add the year of the movie, 1978. And voila, I have here in my list of movies the movie Superman with the year written as subtitle. Now that we are already a little more familiar with attributes, I will directly change the name of an attribute in the class dish. Indeed, if we open the instance of the class dish, for example our magret of duck, we see that the name of the property designation is product designation, and it should be dish designation. So we will immediately correct this. I go in the classes, expand the class dish, I select the attribute designation, and I edit the attribute name. And now we have dish designation. Okay, so we have our event Dinner at Bob, and we have our movie Superman. The goal is now to connect the movie Superman to the event Dinner at Bob. To do this, we will add a third attribute in the class movie, and this attribute will be a link to an instance of the class event, or rather a list of links to events, because we can imagine that we watch the same movie several times at different events. Therefore, let's return to the tab of classes. And let's add a third attribute in our class movie. I confirm that I want to add an attribute, and Mazao asks for the new attribute ID. And this time I write list events. I recall that an ID cannot contain spaces, and that is why I use the hyphen, which makes the identifier more readable. About the name of the attribute, I could simply indicate list of events, but as you will see later, it is better to give a little more sense to the name, about the role that will have this property in the movie instance. So I will indicate watched during, because this property gives the list of events during which this movie was watched. Okay, by default our attribute type is data, and the data type is text. I must change this data type into a list of links to instances. I click here on the text and I get a long list of possibilities. I will explain all of them in an upcoming video, but for the moment I choose list of links to instances. We notice that some properties that follow data type are no longer the same. I now have the property link to the class. This new property allows me to complete the data type information. I can specify that I want that the instances must be from the class event. I therefore click on the Object button and I choose the event class. So now I have my third attribute, watch during, which is a list of links to instances event. So let's see what happens in our movie Superman. I actually have my third property, watch during, and the value displays an event button that allows me to choose an event. So now we have recorded the information that this movie, Superman, was watched during the event Dinner at Bob. This property, watch during, contains a link that I can click, and it opens the event Dinner at Bob. But I do not see the reverse link. I do not see the movie here. In fact, internally, Mazao automatically maintains the reverse link. But if we want to display this link as here in the event instance, we must add in the event class a somewhat particular attribute which will display the reverse link. Therefore, we have to return to the class tab and we have to add a new attribute in the event class. I confirm that I want to add an attribute in the class event, and as usual, Mazao requests the new attribute ID. I will simply write list movies. This new attribute is now placed at the end of the list of attributes that already exist in the class event. Our new attribute list movies is just behind list contacts. You can see the difference in color of the small pin, which is black for the attributes I create and which is brown for predefined attributes of Mazao. I give the name of the attribute watched movies. Okay, now I want that this attribute displays the reverse link of the link that was created previously. In this case, the attribute type is no longer really a data. Here, the user must not provide any new information. In fact, I want to display some information that is already implicitly in the database. I will therefore change the type of the attribute itself and not the type of data as we did previously. I click on the value data and get different choices. And I will select here backlink. Here again, the following property is changed. The data type property has disappeared because now this attribute type is no longer data. On the other hand, I have a property that allows me to specify the origin of the link. And here, the button in the property value shows me the icon of the class attribute. This will therefore allow me to exactly specify the attribute that contains the source of the link I want to reverse. I click on this button attribute and get the list of possible links. These possible attributes are the only attributes that contain a link to this event class. I see that 2 of them are gray. This means that those backlinks are already displayed in this event class. Indeed, in the list of attributes for the event class, I see that I already have the backlink from dish and the backlink from contact. So I choose the only one that I want. the attribute watched during from the class movie. And that's it. Let's see now our event with the backlink list movies. And we have our watched movie property with the value Superman 1978. Well, as we did not say anything about how we want to display this property, Mazao uses the default display. This means the name of the property and its value. To change the display of a property, we have to write a bit of Lisp code. It is therefore not part of this video, and I will explain how to change the appearance of an attribute after the video that introduces the DataLisp language. The value of this attribute watchMovie contains a link to the Superman movie instance, so I can click on this link to display the movie instance. Then I can click on the event, and I come back to my starting point. Okay, we approach slowly to the end of this video. In this video, we have seen how to create a class and how to add attributes. We have used text attributes, link and backlink attributes. About link and backlinks, when using the application, it is not possible to see the difference between them. And this is exactly the goal. Links and backlinks appears in an identical manner. We can edit a backlink as we edit a link. For example, let's quickly create a second movie, say Superman 2. And I am not going to input any event here. Let's return to our event Dinner at Bob. We know that Watch Movies property is a backlink, but this made no difference in the user interface. I can enter in edition mode and add a movie in the list as if this attribute were an attribute of the list of link to instance movie, and I add the movie Superman 2. So we now here watch 2 movies during the event Dinner at Bob. I have not yet mentioned how to order the elements in the list. Currently, this order is not yet defined, and therefore there is no particular order. If I want to be able to change the order of the movies manually, I must indicate this in the definition of the attribute Watch Movies. I therefore return in the tab classes. I put this attribute Watch Movies in edition mode, and there I see under the property source of the link, the property order of items. I click on the value and select manual. And now in this list, the links will be organized manually. Let's return to our event. And now we see here some small icons that let us move the movies in the list. Okay, and now I have here my 2 links. So I added Superman 2 here in the backlink. But now what happens in the source link, in the movie instance? Okay, let's click here, and wonderful, the instance has automatically the link to the event. And now, this is the end of this video. This video was performed with the version 1.04 of Mazao and DataLisp. So thank you very much to have watched it, and I also thank everyone who sent me comments. It is always very useful. I hope you will continue to do so. So have a wonderful day and see you very soon.